Hi, my name's Matthias. I'm an Alberta-based artist and printmaker. I'm also a biologist. I've had a couple of different careers in my life. I started as a biologist professionally, but I've always been an artist since I was a kid. And probably about a little over 10 years ago I started working towards my art degree at the University of Alberta. I have a Master's of Fine Art in Printmaking from there. And before that I did my Master of Science degree at University of Manitoba in Winnipeg, and before that a Bachelor of Science in Ecology at University of Guelph. And so I definitely what I would consider an interdisciplinary artist. My biology background definitely influences everything I do, almost everything I do in my art practice. A lot of my work in the last few years has been focused on woodcut printmaking. I have a little one here I can show you. So what I do with woodcut is, oh, is this still wet? It is. Take a piece of plywood and with some little hand carving tools, like I've got one right here, like this, I carve imagery into the wood and roll it up with ink and then transfer that image to a piece of paper. So I work a lot with that kind of technique. I'm going to show you some recent things that I've been working on. I've also been doing some experiments lately with something called stop motion animation using a type of printmaking called monotype printmaking. So I have a few images that I'll show, and I'll talk about the process as I'm working a little bit. I'm just at home in my basement studio. I live in Parkland County, Alberta, just about maybe 40 minutes west of Edmonton. I've been in Alberta for 16 years or so now, and before that I was in Manitoba and BC and Ontario. I moved around a little bit, but I've been in Alberta for a long time. And I think part of that is Alberta's been really good to me in both of my careers, but especially the last, 8 years or so as a professional artist. The province has been really supportive in a lot of different ways of the arts community, so that's a lot of the reason that I'm still here. I really like having some quiet space to work, so a couple of years ago we moved out into the country with my kids and husband. I like having a little slice of nature just to think and find inspiration. What else can I talk about? So I'm really inspired by everything I find in nature, and for a lot of my work I start by collecting things that interest me in the natural world, and then I look at them in different ways, mostly using microscopy. We have a few different microscopes at home in my studio that I use. So this big woodcut that I've been working on behind me, for example, it's like abstractedly references what's called like a slide squash of some, what was that, of like a floral part of dandelions. Yeah. And so it's totally abstract, but you can see that it kind of references forms that you might find in nature, but you're not really sure what it is exactly. I think a lot of my work kind of has that feel to it. It's somehow biological but very abstracted. And I think that's just the nature of the way that I end up looking at things, a lot of it shifting the scale that you're looking at, blowing microscopic things up really big, and that kind of thing. So this is what it looks like just outside of my basement studio in my home. We're just about 15 minutes north of Stony Plain, Alberta. And this is really what I need to be in the right frame of mind for working. I don't know whether it's the biology part of me or, well, probably the artist and biology part of me both. I just need to be surrounded by as much nature as possible. So we were lucky enough to find a place out here that we could afford, and I spend a lot of time just finding things to inspire my work in my backyard space here. We have a wetland area and a creek running through it, and all kinds of plants and wildlife, and a lot of what I work on is microscopic, so I take samples from creek water and look at little botanical parts from plants, anything that I end up, I don't know, finding an interest in. I tend to try to focus on one area for a little while to really excavate it for everything I can. So at the moment I'm working on a collaborative project with a freshwater phycologist, a friend of mine who works in the States. A phycologist is someone who studies algae. And we both really love diatoms, which are these unicellular algae that are unique in so many ways, but they have like glass cell walls, silica walls. And we've probably heard of them before. They are responsible for something like 50% of the photosynthesis on the planet. But they're just so beautiful and cool, like morphologically and taxonomically and ecologically, and it's an area of interest that we both share. So we've just started talking about how we might collaborate with something that brings in her research and her science-based research and my creative research. The first thing we've done is a postal mail collaboration. So we're sending each other just something random in the mail related to our work, and the other person's going to respond to what they get. And also I just finished some experimenting with something called printmaking animation that I was working on specifically with Paula's work in mind. And I'll show you that and talk about that a little bit too. This is just a video clip of me poking around at the microscopes. I do this whenever I have like an hour that I can squeeze in, especially in the spring, summer, and fall months, because there's not a lot in the long 5-6 months of winter here that I can gather from outside to look at under the microscopes. Although my friend Paula, who I mentioned I'm doing a collaboration with, did tell me that diatoms can overwinter under ice and in creek beds and stuff, so I might do some of gathering some of those samples in the winter this year. We'll see. So this little clip from a couple weeks ago, I'm looking at one of my favorite weeds, like quote unquote weeds, because it's just like what people call any plant that they don't want around. Anyways, this orange hawkweed is so beautiful. It's my favorite colors of oranges and yellows in there, and it's on like a noxious weed list for everywhere around here. It's originally from Europe, so it's not a native species. Oh, there you can just see me holding a little piece of it up. So, oh yeah, I thought that big woodcut I showed in some clip was dandelion floral parts, but I think it's orange hawkweed stigma squashes under the microscope that was of. So there are these little curly Q things in the inflorescence of, like, it's called inflorescence. It's a bunch of little flowers together that look like one flower. So I'm taking off the stigmas there and sticking them onto a slide. I think I put a little bit of glue on the slide because they're so tiny, and you just breathe on them and they swoosh off of your slide. So anyways, I'm trying to arrange a few on a slide there to look at from my orange hawkweed, which I love, and it grows in our yard, and the neighbors get mad if you don't pick it or mow it or spray it with chemicals, which I would never do as an ecologist. Spray chemicals in my yard. So my kids are 6 and they pick big bouquets of those for me. And I use them for my creative research. So that's what I'm doing. I'm putting them on a slide. That biggest microscope under my hair there is a light microscope, so it shines light up through the bottom of the slide. And one of the eyepieces I've removed, and we have an adapter that we can put. That's actually a really old Canon digital camera, but I have an adapter for it to stick on that microscope so I can take some photos from there. Yeah, so that's what I'm doing. I'll insert some photos at the end here of what I see through the eyepieces or camera, so you can see the kind of explorations that I'm doing. So to make the slide, I just put like I said, I glued it a little bit, but there's something called a cover slip, these little glass squares that you put on top of the specimen. So I got the specimen there, I use an eyedropper with some water. All of my cover slips are sliding out of the way by accident there because I have too much water. Usually just need 1 drop of water under a cover slip. I think I have a few samples in a row on that slide. And here I'm just, I always start at the lowest magnification before working your way up through the different magnifications on the microscope, and I'm just adjusting, like focusing and the amount of light so I can start to see what's on the slide clearly, and then I can move around, and I usually just take a bunch of images on the camera, videos or images that I can reference later. I mean, you can't keep these kind of live specimens in the state they're in preserved over winter unless you put them in some kind of preservative or freeze them or something, and then they won't be the same. So I try to get a lot of this kind of stuff done, you know, in the evenings in the summer and stuff, so I can have lots of digital files to work with. So here's just a photo of one of the slides that I was just looking at under the microscope. Those are a bunch of female flower parts from a dandelion, which is like a single dandelion. It's a bunch of flowers all together called an inflorescence. And that's a similar flower part from a sunflower. The stigma and style from little sunflower flowers within the inflorescence of a sunflower, also under a light microscope. So a lot of these forms are just like play around with things that really captivate me. Those are some of those dandelion stigmas squished on a slide. Yeah, so I'm just showing you some of what I was looking at under the microscope in that last clip. Those are some other flower parts, little sepals around the individual flowers in a sunflower. And then that reddish part on the tips of those little sepals, I think they're sepals. I just went in higher magnification to look at the cells under there, and I just like playing around and exploring with microscopy. So I mentioned I'm starting a collaborative project with an algae researcher. This is a diatom. You can see the little marks on the silica wall. It's called the frustule, the outside part of the cell. And there's all kinds of cool patterns and markings. Anyways, I'm just playing around with some samples from my backyard, just to get into the mood to start some collaborative stuff with my friend Paula, who studies these things. Those are some other diatoms sticking off of some green algae there. The little star pokey things are the diatoms. Here's another dandelion squashed on a microscope slide, and in the bottom right there you can see a little part of the ray flower, or like the petal from the ray flowers on the outside of a dandelion. So I have the current series of larger format woodcuts that I'm working on right now are kind of all playing with imagery from these microscopic images of, I guess they're all flowers from the composite or Asteraceae family, dandelions and sunflowers and the orange hawkweed that I was looking at in our little microscope room. I also play a lot in Photoshop with stuff, so it's just some random images. I got thousands and thousands of digital images of things that I've altered, and I don't even know what I have in all my computer files. That was just some kind of filter in Photoshop that I was playing around with for a woodcut. So here I've just recorded a few different key steps that I do with printing a wood block. So first I roll out this, it's called an ink palette. The ink looks pretty thick there, but it's like it's supposed to be just a thin layer of ink that you roll out with that big rubber rolling pin. And then you just keep charging that roller with more ink over and over again, and build it until you build up enough ink on the surface to get a good impression or a transfer of the image to paper. So you can just, how long is this little clip? Just, what is it? 3 minutes, I think, to roll up this little woodcut that I just printed the other week. A lot of my woodcuts are well, I've done some smaller, I try to make myself do some smaller work to shift what I'm doing, but I like to work really big typically, so just because of the type of plywood I'm using, it's a birch plywood that I get from Windsor Plywood. Comes in big 5 by 5 foot squares, so, and they'll do a free cut for me, so I usually get them to cut off I think an 18-inch slice off one side, and then I use that big rectangle that's left for a lot of pieces. I like that size and shape, and then use the smaller cut-offs for smaller work. So there's definitely a technique to rolling the ink, especially on big woodcuts that I do, because you can get funny lines going across your work if you let like the edge of the roller go, say, diagonally across an open area where there's not supposed to be ink. Anyway, so I usually try to roll some across grain and some with the grain of the wood to make sure that it's getting good ink coverage. And if you just keep rolling over and over again without recharging the roller with ink, you'll just start to get the pattern of your woodcut transferring onto other areas of the plate, and you won't really be adding new ink on top. So anyways, this little woodcut only took a few minutes to ink up. The larger ones, the first time I put ink on a woodcut, it can take a while for like a big 5 foot tall wood block. I don't know, it can take like 45 minutes to get it charged enough just to take a first proof. The first impression I always just do on a cheap sheet of newsprint, because you have to print it at least a couple times to get a really good impression. So especially not working with a press, I mean, I would never have a press big enough to print my big wood blocks, so I just use them, just print them by hand, like I think I showed in another clip, a hand baron. So you're just using your arm muscles to transfer the image through the palm of your hand, and it takes printing it a few times to get a really nice, even black ink impression without like white patchy areas in the print. Am I done rolling this one yet? You can see the shine on it from the light there. I usually bend down eye level with the plate to look for the right amount of ink, and I know it's ready. Just a couple final rolls, I guess. When I work really big, I usually move my printing stations out into my garage where I have more space to work, but I'm just working in the basement studio space here. So here I've already got the paper on there, and you just see me using the hand baron to print and transfer the image to paper. So I have a sheet of like this thin, I think it's mulberry paper. Looks like there's a little bubble in it. And I've dampened that so it'll be more receptive to receiving the inky image on it. So I just misted it with water and got the excess water off. So it's just damp, and laid that on the wood block, and then put a few sheets of newsprint on top so that I can rub it with that hand baron. It's just a piece of bamboo stretched over that little hard cardboard circle. There are much nicer, more expensive ones you can get. But I just have some extra pieces of bamboo that I can replace if I need to, and I always oil it with a couple of drops of oil before I print, just to keep it kind of supple. Not just any oil, I think it's camellia oil it's called. Just traditionally what I would use. There's also like a different kind of backing paper you can use instead of newsprint to print with this technique, but I just use some newsprint. I got a big supply of it here. And I'm trying to focus the weight on the palm of my bottom part of the palm of my hand, not my knuckles or fingers. And just going in tiny circles, try and get even pressure everywhere. So this is really the only way to print really oversized wood blocks, which is a lot of what I work on. I mean, I have used a press big enough to print some of them, but some of the pieces I work on are just way too big to print any other way, so I just ink up giant wood blocks on the table and then lay them on the floor and just do this across them until I transfer the image. I think I'm just looking at the wrinkles in my paper there, because I got a couple of wrinkles and it's okay. Okay, and then here's pulling the proof off of the wood cut. The ink is super sticky, so that's why it looks like the paper comes off slowly. So that's just the first proof. It's pretty good. It's a lot easier than the big wood cuts that I print. So I'm gonna just pull out a few prints to talk about. I've been working on a bunch of projects this year, 2020, because I've had some time to think about things at home and what direction I want my work to go. Let me just pull out some. A few representative pieces from different projects. Printmakers often store their smaller works in these map drawers or planchettes. My planchettes are always packed full. I feel like I produce a lot of work, and then I think a lot of artists work that way. Well, some artists work that way. Produce a lot of work and then pick and choose where you want to focus ultimately, and all this stuff. I usually have at least a few different projects on the go at a given time for different purposes. There's this amazing gallery in Calgary, the Christine Klassen Gallery, and I've been partnering with her for a number of years, Christine and her partner, business partner. So in any given year there's usually 1 or 2 group shows that I'm a part of, and 1 or 2 solo shows, so I have work that I produce for her. Let me get a couple more things here. All this stuff. I don't even know. Oh, not from the kid work. Whoops. This is good. It gives me a chance to organize my plan task a little bit. Alright, well, let's start with, I don't know where to start. What was I doing, let's see, in February, March, when this whole COVID pandemic started? I was, you know what, that first woodcut I got out, I'm going to start there. I actually carved this woodcut. I carved this woodcut, I don't know which way it's going to go. Maybe like that. Maybe like 4 years ago or so. I had just finished a different project and I was looking to switch directions with my work. And I wasn't really sure what I was doing, so I just left the woodcut aside and didn't do anything with it, but I just printed it now, several years later. This is just a first proof on a nice printmaking paper with it. I often print on these like Japanese made papers. They're a little thinner than a lot of the paper that you might be used to seeing. Like this is like a heavier cotton rag paper. You know, people use for watercolor and drawing and painting. A lot of woodcut artists use a thinner type of Japanese paper that the fibers are really long, so it's quite a strong paper, but it's also really flexible and has a delicate kind of quality to it at the same time. It really picks up a lot of fine details in the woodcut, which I like about it. And it's good for printing. I don't have a printmaking press that I'm using at home right now. I just use something called a hand baron for printing. Let's see if I can show that. It looks like this. I'll show you a video of printing after, and you just transfer the image from the wood block to paper with that. So it's a really sensitive and traditional Japanese technique for transferring a woodcut image to paper. Anyways, back to the content of what this work's about. I mentioned in a previous clip that I do a lot of microscopy. In this case, I was probably for, I don't know, a decade now. I collect like any found dead bugs that I find outside and look at them. I got fixated on dragonfly and damselfly wings for a long time in my work, and then I referred to a body of work that I sort of tied off. That was that. Anyway, so to change things up a bit, I started looking at butterfly and moth wings. This was just like an abstract drawing of looking under a dissecting microscope, which is different than a light microscope, and at the scales on a butterfly wing, and just doing some patterns and imagery just inspired by what I was seeing there. Anyway, so that's that. But several years later, it's interesting. I definitely like the line and like the sort of formal qualities of the work, so I might think about it again. But the butterfly and moth wings totally came back into my work earlier this year. in a different way, I was, once I started looking at these little individual scales from I think it was a moth, no, it was a butterfly wing, under the light microscope at a much higher magnification, I was really taken with these these patterns of circles and globules and dots on each individual scale. Actually, it was in 2019 I did a large body of work that was funded by the Alberta Foundation for the Arts, and I'll show you some images from that body of work. So that was last year, and I did a big series of 8 oversized woodcuts. Can't really show you one right now under the camera because they're too big to get out, but I'll insert some frames here to show you. So that work was all inspired by these butterfly wing scales, and something that's like a nanostructure inside the wings called a gyroid, and it's just this mathematical description of a 3-dimensional structure that refracts light. And I was just, the more I read about the butterfly wings, the more I was like, it's so cool that they don't actually have like pigment per se. It's these gyroid structures refracting light that allows you to see the colors in their wings. Anyway, so I had a body of work last year, big woodcuts that I'll show you, that looked at those, and then this year I wanted to revisit it in a different way. Just from a different angle. I started with teaching myself how to do some drawings in the free modeling software SketchUp that you can get online, and figured out how to draw a 3-dimensional gyroid in there, which I can show you a clip of that too. And I ended up doing lots and lots and lots of drawings and prints. Let me see if I can hold this up better. Of these gyroid structures. We can't really see that here. So this is like a small woodcut that I ultimately paired with something called a trace monotype of these gyroids that I designed in SketchUp. Anyways, they're pretty neat. I was just this really strange structure. I was just obsessed with it for a few months. So I don't think I've shown that work anywhere though. I don't know how many woodcuts I did. Lots of little woodcuts. Here, and let me see if I can find you a... This is an actual woodcut, so I use these little tools. Let me fix the light here. These little tools to carve the image into the woodcut. I see this. And where can I put this? And print these. So I can't remember how many of these I did. I think I was going to tile them all together maybe. I kind of moved on to something else, but so I have a bunch of these little gyroid woodcuts and tons and tons of these this type of print, which is called a trace monotype, which is a really easy, fast and easy way of working monotype printmaking. Essentially, monotype means you get one image from one image of the print, and you can't replicate it. Unlike lots of other types of printmaking, like woodcut, I could reprint that wood block as many times as I want. But monotype, you just I won't get in. I'll maybe show you a video how you do it. But so I did lots of these just sketchy kind of monotype drawings, which I really like. I really actually love the line quality of them. So I finished a couple pieces from that series, but what else is here? Lots of experimental monotypes with these gyroid structures. Yeah, so I make lots and lots of work and then whittle down where I really want to focus with it in the end. So this is it's relatively new. It's from March February, March, April this year, I think. So, you know, I will go finalize that work at some point or something. More of these little woodcuts, more of these monotypes. Lots of monotypes. Okay. Other stuff. Oh, there's no space here. Okay, I'm just move these aside for a minute. That's a different body of work. Those are other things. Let me put this away so we can look at some of these larger pieces down here. Yeah, so I think with those little gyroid woodcuts I was doing, I eventually moved on to making something a little bit bigger in scale. So you can see these are, I don't know what they are size-wise. Yeah, about 18 by 30 inches. And I can't remember how many I did, but I was just this three-dimensional mock-up that I did in SketchUp. You could just look at it from so many angles, and I was really just fascinated by the form. So it was kind of like tangentially related to these butterfly wings, but let me pick out some of the pieces I like from here. I tend to just make lots and lots of new work, and like a given woodcut, I maybe print it once and then I move on to something else. So sometimes I think I need to slow down, and you know, I could print an edition of a woodcut like this, which is a completed woodcut. I only have one of them. I might make an edition of, say, 5, like 5 good prints from this. I have a show coming up in Calgary at the gallery I mentioned earlier, Christine Klassen Gallery, in December. I can't remember when we're going to open it. So I will finalize, I'll decide with her what works we're going to show, but none of these have been shown anywhere, and I like some of them. So there's that one. I might keep this drawer open. I can put stuff away. So it's totally abstract. I just love exploring line and form and the grains of, I know you can't see very well on the camera here. You can see the grain, can you? The focusing grain of the wood coming through, and you know, almost all my work is just black ink on the background paper color. I find colors, just adding another color of ink to it, it just distracts me from, like, there's so many directions my work could go, and so many things I want to think about when I'm working. It's just too much sometimes to add color in. So for simplicity's sake, I often just print, like, roll things up in black ink and print it, and that's where it goes. This one you saw already. Oh, that's different. Same size woodcut, but different. Not related. Well, this one was, you know what, when the pandemic started, you know, I think I didn't feel like working for a few weeks there. It was in the middle of, let's see, once the kids weren't able to go to school anymore, I think that was mid-March. So then I was trying to continue. My kids were in kindergarten, French immersion kindergarten at the time. I was trying to figure out how to get a little bit of work time in and still get some of their kindergarten work done. The big challenge was the French immersion part, because my French is terrible, and so it wasn't really an immersive experience for French at home, but I used Google Translate a lot. Anyways, the pandemic was going on. We had Jason Kenney, this fairly right-wing premier, in charge of the government, and this is just a quote from him that I translated into French. You know, people are like freaking out about what's going on with this COVID virus and stressed out for so many reasons on so many levels about like the economy, their kids, and people they know getting sick. Anyways, and his response is like increase the police force in the province, and like I can't translate this right now. The powers of the police force. Anyways, this is a quote for him about this is how we're gonna tackle this. Like at the beginning of the pandemic, is give the police forces more power. It's like you are just out to lunch. Anyways, that's what this is about. The French. Me trying to teach my kids French and having a right-wing government in charge during a super stressful time. Anyways, I have a couple of pieces, little on their own pieces related to the pandemic. I had a lot of work opportunities totally canceled this year, like so many people, like so many artists. I was going to have a show in Chicago that I was really excited about when was it scheduled for? June, I think, and that was of course canceled. It was going to be a duo exhibit with another artist from Maine who had a biology background and was also really into woodcut. And so we're still talking, collaborating, and hoping to reschedule that show for 2021. But where was I going with that? Oh, so I was still thinking about collaborative things that I was going to do with that artist and what work I was maybe going to put in that show. Where I was going with this. Yes, so many things were canceled this year. Shows, traveling, got a travel grant that I had to decline, applications that I put into things like artist residencies that just were canceled. Anyways, a disappointing year from that perspective, but like, you know, everyone's doing the best they can, and art agencies, I think, have really like done so much to try and think outside of the box for keeping the arts alive. So this is, anyways, I'll talk about my work again. I really like this woodcut. It's also part of this gyroid abstracted three-dimensional thing that I made in SketchUp, related to the structure of butterfly wing scales. But I decided to try some color. I was, anyways, I love any kind of woodcut, and when I see people who do woodcut with color, multiple plates or reduction, there are different types of ways you can put color in woodcut. So I'm going to end with some images, some process pictures. This is me just pulling off a big woodcut print in my garage, and some images of my work from the past year or so. I showed that body of large woodcuts. Again, this is all related to those gyroids that I was exploring in butterfly wing scales. I showed this work at a couple of galleries in 2019, so that was great. I was really happy to be able to exhibit it. What's coming up next here? This was the first piece in that series. It's also kind of inspired by some of the science fiction I was reading at the time. This one was loosely inspired by, among other things, Jeff Vandermeer novel called Born that features this amorphous, strange entity. Alien. No, it's not an alien. It's a piece of biotechnology. Anyways, that kind of started this whole series. And then they turned into these other things relating to my butterfly wing explorations. I'm a big fan of speculative fiction and science fiction, so that imagery sometimes like gets into my work too. So I've just been using these home studio spaces for a little over 2 years now. Both like a couple of rooms in a basement and a really large garage space. So hopefully over time I can work on making the garage more of a 4-season studio space. Right now it's just a summer 3-season, I guess, space. No, just summer. It gets cold in there. Need to work on the flooring and stuff. Anyways, these are my studio spaces that I work with at home. This, I think, was just a first proof of that big woodcut, but it's a photo of the most exciting part in printmaking, of pulling a proof, like getting your first image off of a plate that you've been working on. Well, this is one of the more from earlier 2020 pieces that I showed you before from my plan chest. So there's, I think, 4 or 5 woodcuts in this series of this sort of scale, size, and type of imagery. I think I have one of my animations coming up here. Gotta pay close attention because it's only 10 seconds long. I don't even know if it's 10 seconds. And it uses monotype printmaking and some field recordings, sound recordings. I've played around with animation a little bit the last few years, but just very recently in the last couple months, I guess, I've tried some printmaking animation, which I haven't seen done very often because it's hard to, I think, do it without doing it in a way that's really time intensive. But I've been playing around with monotype in a way that could let me create some stop motion animations without a huge time investment, to see if I'm kind of interested in how it turns out. And I like my results so far, so I think I'm gonna keep playing around with some more animations. I have a couple embedded in here for you to see. And there's one of several large woodcuts of these these different flowers from the composite family that I've been looking at under microscopes. They're little floral parts that turned into these big oversized, like this woodcut's about 5 feet big oversized abstracted things of, I don't know if they look like tendrils or they look botanical, I think, but it doesn't really matter if you know what the original reference imagery was. It's more about what it is as a final piece, as kind of referencing the natural world, but something that doesn't look immediately recognizable, and at the scale of it's important though, so it's hard to see it on a computer screen, but I like having these big slightly alien, slightly earthly looking things in bold, like black and white. Anyways, it's new work, so I'm still thinking about it and working on it. I think I have a few more installation photos of some work from late 2019, these big woodcuts. Wouldn't have been able to get this work done without a grant from the Alberta Foundation for the Arts, most of which went towards childcare. My kids weren't in kindergarten yet at the time when I started this work. I really like working at larger scales. I mean, these pieces are 5 feet by 3.5 feet, which isn't really a huge surface to work on for an artist. For a printmaker, it's pretty big, but I like working even larger. So the piece I'm just starting today, actually, what are we at, like early September, is going to be double that size. I'm not sure. I guess I'll print it on the floor somewhere in my garage or something. And just on one large sheet of rolled out paper. So I'm excited to go a little bit bigger and see what I can do, pushing the limits of size and scale with some oversized work. It's really cool seeing my work get framed once in a while for shows, because I don't have any of my work framed really. Well, it costs a lot to frame a really large piece, but it's neat to be able to see them either in like clients' homes who've purchased work or at exhibitions. You know, the wood block itself is such a beautiful thing. I mean, for me, the final product is usually the work on paper, but I just store the wood blocks, but they're such beautiful tactile objects. So I've kept every woodcut I've ever carved, and I don't know what I would ever do with them, but anyways, they're kind of, I'm not really a sculptor, but I'd love to think more about three-dimensional approaches to using the stuff that I create when I'm printmaking. So I'll think on that some more. I spent a couple of months earlier this year working on some miniature prints. There's it's kind of popular in the printmaking world to have these miniature print exhibitions where it's because it's easy to mail something small, so people from all over the world will submit small scale works to calls for exhibits, for mini print exhibits, and then, you know, there'll be like 200 artists from 100 or 200 countries all showing in a space. So I created some works for the intent, like with the intent of exhibiting at some of those shows. So in 2020, I think there's been, despite some cancellations and stuff, 4 shows that I had some work in of these miniature prints in, where were they? One in Ottawa, one in Spain, one in Dubai, and one in Bulgaria, which is so cool. Like, I've never been to, well, I've been to Ottawa. I haven't been to any of those other places, but the little prints have, so that's cool. Maybe one day when we can travel again. So what else do I have here? I've lost track of what still I'm on here, but I think it's just works that I pulled out to show you from my plant chest drawer before. Oh yeah, some text-based stuff. You know, I've been thinking about, I always have lots of ideas and it's hard to like focus on one thing for without getting distracted by other side ideas, but I feel like text could have a place in this new collaboration with an LG colleague of mine. I mean, her, like, she doesn't make artwork, she makes things like scientific publications for papers, and there is some cool imagery involved with her work too, but I feel like text might have a place in our collaborations. We're just starting to talk about things though, so we'll have to see where that goes. I think I have a large woodcut in here that I only ever proofed. I think I have like dozens of woodcuts that I've carved and either haven't ever proofed or have just proofed once and thought I'm going to think about it and come back to it later. It's hard to find the time as a full-time parent, and to sort of have the continuity to follow things through sometimes. Like I'll have an hour in the evening, come down and do some work. And anywho, I think I'm ending with an animation here. So this is animation that I just did yesterday.